What's up everybody, welcome back. So in the first episode we started our little multiplayer shooter, and we actually have a pawn that we can walk around with and we can sort of shoot. So we have kind of a decent start over here, and in this video we're going to start setting up a little bit of our framework. So first of all, let's create a few new blueprints. Let's go into the content drawer or content browser, or how you want to call it. And let's go into our framework folder, and the first thing I'm going to create is a GameInstance. So I'm going to look for a GameInstance over here, or in the all classes, and simply type GameInstance and select it. So blueprint, shooter, GameInstance. So the GameInstance is kind of useful, but also not really useful. It's a class that will be created when you start the game, and it will be persistent over the whole game until you shut it down. So it will always be there. It's not like a game mode that will be created when you open a level, and then when you open a new level, a new game mode will be created. So the GameInstance is persistent throughout the entire game, but it's only local, so it does not get replicated, and normally it's not really used for things like game logic or anything. So it's normally more used for UI related stuff, creating sessions, joining sessions, and things like that. So that's what a GameInstance does, and we're just going to make sure that we have it, and in the project settings we're going to assign it. So go to edit project settings and then to your maps and modes, and all the way down you can assign the GameInstance class, and we're going to change it to our shooter GameInstance, and that should be good to go. Now we're also gonna need a new game mode and a pawn and a controller. So we already have a pawn or a character and a game mode for the gameplay, but if we are in a menu, we don't actually want our character to spawn, and we don't want to be able to shoot and things like that. So it's easier to set up a separate game mode for when you're in a menu, and also have a different pawn when you're in a menu. So we're going to create those blueprints. So right click, blueprint class, and the first thing is a game mode base again. And this is going to be our BP shooter menu game mode. And then we're also going to create a new character. So again, right click, blueprint class, and this is our BP shooter menu pawn. And we're also going to need a player controller. So right click, blueprint class, and select the player controller, and this is our BP shooter menu controller. So let's open up our new menu game mode. And for the menu game mode, we're gonna assign the new character that we created. So the default pawn class is going to be our shooter menu pawn. And then we can remove the HUD again, we're not gonna use it. And for the player controller class, that's going to be our shooter menu controller. And then we can compile and save it. So we have those set up. Now let's create 2 new levels. So in the content browser, let's go to the content folder. We already have a maps folder over here, and I'm going to create a new folder in there for the menu maps. And now let's make sure we have everything saved. And I'm going to create a new level, and it's going to be an empty level. I don't want anything to be in here. I'm going to use this for the main menu, so it's just going to have a black background. You can build a scene in here if you would like to, or you could add a background to the widget for the menu that we're going to create. So one way or the other, you can make it look nicer if you want to. For now, I'm just going to use an empty level. So let's save this as well. Save current level as. In the menu maps folder, and this is my main menu map. And now I'm also going to create another new level, and this is going to be the basic one. and I'm gonna save this as the lobby level. So we're gonna use this for our multiplayer lobby later on. So lobby menu map. So we have those in place as well. So with this map open, we can go to the world settings for this map, and we can set a game mode override over here. So if we do not specify a game mode override, it will use the game mode that we assigned in the project settings. So that would be the FPS shooter game mode. But in this case, we want to use the menu game mode. So we're gonna override it over here to use the shooter menu game mode for the lobby level. Save this, and now we want to do the same thing for the main menu map, so let's open it up as well. And in the world settings, again, the game mode override is going to be the shooter menu game mode, and save it as well. So we have those things set up. I think we're going to create the widget for the main menu now, so we can actually show a main menu. So let's start creating our main menu widget. First I'm going to create a new folder again, and that's going to be my widgets folder. Right click, go to user interface and create a widget blueprint. And over here you can simply select the user widget. Then that is the main menu widget blueprint. And let's open it up. So we're gonna keep this pretty simple, but at the same hand, I still want to show you how you can build something like this. So we're gonna do it together. The first thing we need is a canvas panel. So in UE4 this was already there, and in UE5 it's not. So make sure you add a canvas panel first, and then I'm gonna add a border in here. And I'm gonna keep this at the top left of the screen, and let's align it a little bit, so something about 100 out of each corner, and make sure it's a little bit bigger, so something about 250 by 250 might work. And I'm gonna make it a little bit transparent, so appearance, the brush color, and then set the alpha to 0.5. So inside my border I'm gonna add a vertical box, so that should be in panel over here, and inside a vertical box you can drop all kinds of other widgets and they will be aligned above each other, so vertically. So inside this vertical box I'm gonna drag in a button, and on top of the button I'm gonna drag text. So we have a button with some text over here, and this is going to be my solo game button. So let's change the text for this button first, set it to solo game. And then I'm going to change the font a little bit, so let's make it italic. The size should be fine, why not? And let's keep it wide. Let's keep it a little bit simple. For the button we can change the appearance as well, so let's make the button a little bit black. So we have the normal appearance for when we hover over it, when we press it, when it's disabled, all those kinds of things. So for now we're gonna only worry about normal, hovered and pressed. So the normal color, I'm gonna set the tint to black, so that's all zeros. And then I'm gonna give it a little bit of alpha, so 0.7, so it's kinda grayish. And when we hover over it, I'm gonna make it darker, so I'm gonna keep the alpha at 1, and then when it's pressed I'm gonna set the alpha a bit lower again, so again it's black, and then I'm going to put the alpha at 0.3. So then when we hover over it in game you can actually see something happening. So let's rename this button, and this is the, oh come on, there we go, the button for my solo game. So we can work with it later. Now we can duplicate this button, select it and press Ctrl D on your keyboard. In Unreal 4 it used to be Ctrl W, I don't know why they changed it, but it's Ctrl D in this case. So this is going to be our button for hosting a game, so button host game. And let's change the text on the button as well. Now let's duplicate it again, so Ctrl D, and make this button a search game, so for when we want to search for other online games. And again, make sure we change the actual text on the button as well. And the last one that we're going to add is going to be quit game, so we can actually quit the game as well. And again, change the text. Sure. There we go. So to make this a little bit more nicer, maybe not, I'm gonna add 2 spacers in between. So I'm looking for spacer and just drag it in here. So the first one I want to be on top of the host game button, and I'm gonna increase the size a little bit. So something about 15 maybe. And I'm gonna duplicate the spacer and put it above the quit game button as well, and make this one a little bit bigger maybe, so something like this. And now let's adjust the border to fit a little bit better. There we have it. So this is going to be our main menu for right now. It's not pretty, but it's going to have to do. So first of all, let's make sure this actually shows up in game. So let's make that happen. So to show my main menu, I'm going to create a function in my game instance. So go to the framework folder, open up your game instance, and let's create a new function in here. So UI show main menu. And we're going to create the widget in here. So look for a create a widget. Let's create our main menu and store this as a variable. Promote to variable, main menu, widget blueprint. So we want to get an add to viewport node in here, but then we want to make sure that we drag in the actual variable that we created and do not hook it up to the setter, because right now we're going to drag in the variable again at the front here, and we're going to add a isValid node. So if our main menu already exists, but maybe at some point we decide to hide it when we want to show a pause menu or something, then we can still call this function and it won't create the main menu again, it will simply show it. So that's a little failsafe in here. We need to make sure that we get the player controller and hook it up at this pin, and then from the player controller I'm also going to drag off and set the input mode to UI only. And I'm also going to make sure that when we open the main menu that we're going to show the mouse cursor. So drag off the player controller again and set show mouse cursor. So those are all things that are handled by the player controller, so that's why you need to drag off the player controller in this case. And right now we are still in the main menu before anything happens, so we do not have to worry about multiplayer or replication or anything like that. So that's easy. So this should work. Let's get a return node in here and make sure that we show the mouse cursor. So we set this to true. So with this event in place, we can close it down. And if we are in the main menu level, I'm gonna open up the level blueprint. So over here, click this little icon, you get a drop down menu and you can open your level blueprint. And then from begin play, I'm simply gonna get my game instance. And we need to cast this to our game instance from the shooter game. And then we can call our function to show the main menu. So UI show main menu. And right now, that means if we open up the main menu level, it will also display the main menu. So we should be able to test this. If we hit play, there we have the menu, and our buttons work if we hover over them, but they don't actually do anything yet. So let's set up something for the buttons. So let's open up our main menu again and let's go to the graph so we can make our buttons work. First of all, on the side here, start with the easiest one, quit game. Over here on clicked, click the little plus sign and it will add the event for on clicked. And then we can simply drag over here and we can quit the game. So game, quit game, and that's all we have to do in here. Now we're also gonna set up the solo game button, and we're gonna do the search and host game in the next video because we need to do a little bit more setup for those. So next let's get our solo game button and add an on clicked event. And now we want to get to our game instance and make things happen in there. So let's get to our game instance. And I all forget about the content drawer. I shouldn't have to close the other widget, but that doesn't really matter. So game instance, and in the event graph we're going to create a custom event and call this start solo game. And I'm also going to create a variable in here, and that is solo game, and that's a boolean, so that's fine. So if I start the solo game, I want to set the variable to true, and then I'm simply going to call the open level. And for now, I want to open my map 01. And that's all we need to do to get our game working. So then we can go back to the main menu, and we want to make sure that we get our game instance in here. So we get the event construct. And we can delete pre-construct and event tick. We're not going to use them. So right click and get our game instance. Oh, come on. So get this top one, get game instance, and then we can cast this to our shooter game instance and store this as a variable. That's fine. And now we can drag in the variable over here and then call our start solo game event. So that should make the game launch in solo. So we can compile and save. And let's see if this is working. So let's hit the play button and we are in the main menu. We can quit the game and it will stop. So that's working. And now if we hit solo, we are actually in the game, but we cannot move. So because we set the input mode to UI only on our menu controller, we have to make sure that we fix that. So let's go to the content browser and we're going to create a new player controller right now, because at this point we are still using the default player controller and we cannot make any changes to that. So let's go to the blueprint class and let's create a new player controller, and this is our blueprint shooter player controller. And we need to make sure that we assign it in the game mode. So let's go to our shooter game mode, not your menu game mode, but the normal shooter game mode. And over here you want to set the player controller class to our shooter player controller. So not the menu, but the shooter player controller. And then if we open up this new player controller, then we can go to the event begin play and make sure that we enable the controls again. So this is a player controller. This will exist on local clients but also on the server. So this will execute twice if the game starts, once on the server and once on your local machine. And since these are input events, these only need to happen locally. So first we're going to check if we are a local player controller. And we can hook it up to a branch. So if we are locally controlled, then we're gonna set the input mode to game only. Set game only. And we're gonna hide the mouse cursor again. So set show mouse cursor and set this back to false. We do need to make sure that we plug in a reference to ourselves in here, or this won't work. So right now, if we go back in game, we should be able to control our character. And there we are. back in game and we can move again. So we have that fixed, and we have a new player controller set up as well. So before we dive into creating and searching for sessions, I want to set up a player profile. So we can save something like a player name, and if we use a player profile for that, then we can make sure that if we connect to a server, we can simply load that profile and get information from there. So because we connect to a server, we do not have easy access to our previous player controller and things like that. So if we want to transfer data, something like a save game is a pretty useful option. And it's also easier for players because they don't have to fill in their name, for example, every time they want to play a game. So first of all, let's go to the content browser, and I'm going to create a new folder again, and this is our saved data. And in here, I'm going to right click and create a structure. So let's go to blueprints and create a structure. And this is our s_player profile. And in here for now, I'm only going to store the player name. So we can expand this later, or you can set it up for yourself more extensively as you want. But right now, I'm going to keep it just for the player name. So that was the structure. I didn't know if I did that too quickly. So it's a player name, and the variable is a text variable, and that's the only thing we're adding in here. Then I'm gonna right click again and create a blueprint class, and this time search for a save game. Select the save game and create it, and this is going to be my save game player profile. We can open up the save game, and then we can add a variable in here, and that's our player profile struct. So player profile, and change it to be a player profile struct. So now we can store this player profile struct inside this save game object, and we're going to use this in the game instance. So let's make sure that we open up the instance. In our framework folder, GameInstance, and let's do a quick save in between, why not? So we want to create a few functions for the save game. So let's create a new function, and the first one is going to be check for saved profile. So this is simply going to check if a save game already exists, and if it does, it's going to load it. So we need to get a does save game exist node in here, hook it up over here. So for the slot name, we're going to promote it to a variable and call this something like the player profile slot. So do make sure that you actually enter a value for this variable, or this will not work. So you named it, but you do need to put in a value in here, and then you are good to go. So if this save game exists, we're going to add a branch. If it exists, we're going to load it, and if not, we're going to create one. So let's create a new function and call this load profile. And if the profile already exists, we can get a load game from slot. And the slot name that is stored in our variable, so we can drag it in here again. And if it's loaded, we can cast it to our save game. So that was the player profile save game. And if it's being cast, then we can get the variable from there. So we can simply do get player profile. And then we're going to store this profile at our game instance. So right click, promote a variable, and that's our player profile information. So now we have the information loaded from the save game in our game instance. And we can simply return. And let's do the save profile function as well. So let's create another function and call it save profile. And in here we want to do a little bit different. So first we're going to create a save game object. Save game object. And the save game object we want to create is our player profile object. Then we can promote this to a variable. So this is our save game player profile. I need to sneeze. Thank you. Okay, so we have a save game player profile. Now we can drag this variable in here and we're going to check if this is valid. So is valid. And if it's not valid, we're going to create this new save game object. And if it is valid, then we can simply get information from it. So we can drag the variable in here and we can do set the player profile struct. And we're going to set it to the player profile information that we have stored on our game instance. So we're going to set the struct on the player save game, and this is the information stored in the game instance. So once that's changed, we need to make sure that we save it. So we're going to save game to slot. And over here, we need to drag in the variable again and make sure that you plug in the same slot name as well. So that's why I'm using a variable to make sure it's identical at all places. And now the game is saved from the game instance into our save game object, so we can simply return. So with those functions in place, we can go back to our check for saved profile, and if it exists, we can load the profile, and if it doesn't exist, we're going to call the save profile function. So the save profile, if it doesn't exist, it's going to create a new save game and then make sure that it does exist. So it will automatically create one if it's not there already. That's what I'm trying to say. So there we go, and then we can return over here. So now we need to have something for the player to be able to fill in his name. So let's go to the widget blueprint for the main menu. And let's add a little text box in here. So first I'm going to add a border to make sure it looks a little bit nicer. So drop it onto the canvas panel again. And let's align it so it was 100 down, and let's put it something about 450 out maybe, and then increase it a little bit, 250 by 150, something like that. So make sure it has the same alpha as the other one. Then I'm gonna drag in a vertical box in here again, and first of all I want to get some text so the player knows what he's writing in here. So I'm going to select the text from one of the buttons over here, go to font, right click and copy, and then if I paste the font over here, I don't have to worry about all the information. So that's working. And then for the text, this is going to be the player name, so let's make sure the player knows what he's entering. And then we want to get a editable text box, so that's under input, and let's look for editable text, this one, and we're also going to drop it into the vertical box. And for the settings of this one, let me see, this is a little bit weird, so I think we can actually paste the font again. So if we right click and paste, that should work, but we need to compile it. So these changes won't get updated immediately, so you need to compile it for your changes to make effect. For the hint text, I'm going to simply say name for now, and then I'm going to deselect the inherit from here so I can change the color of the text, and I'm going to make this white again. So again, I need to compile for changes to take effect. And then we can wrap this in a little border maybe. So if I right click over here and go to wrap with and then select the border, and then make my border a little bit more transparent and dark, so set it to black and something about 0.3 maybe. So that should do for now. So we have a little box where the player can enter his name. And we need to set this up in the event graph. So first of all, let's get this editable text over here and let's give it a proper name. So that's my input player name. And this is a variable, so that's good. And now let's continue in the event graph, or not event graph, but in the graph. So in the widget event graph, if we select our input editable text box, we can use the onTextCommitted event for when someone entered a name. And this will return the text, and that's the name that the player entered. So we need to do something with this. And we're going to do that in the game instance. So let's open up our game instance again, go to the framework and open up your shooter game instance. So we created this check for saved game function, and we can use this as well. So let's see. First, let's create a custom event in the event graph. And we're going to call this change player name. So this event is going to have an input, and that's the player name text. So player name, and that's a text. And then we can, let me see, this shouldn't be too hard. We can simply drag in the structure, and if we set this and drag off here, and we type make player profile structure, we can plug in the name. So the name gets put into the structure, and this will get saved into our player profile structure. And now that it's saved on our game instance, we can simply call our save profile function that we created a few moments ago, and this will make sure that the actual save game object will also be updated with the correct information. So if we change the player name, all we need to do is call this function, and now the game instance as well as the save game profile object will have the correct information. So after we did that, we're going to go to our UI show main menu, and when we open the main menu, we want to make sure that if there's already a profile, that we load that player name and put it in the text box so it matches up. So what we're going to do is drag in our check for saved profile function in here. And what this does is make sure that there's always a game loaded. So if a profile does not exist, then the save game will be created and the structure will exist, but it's simply empty, but there will be no null results. So after we did that, then we can simply update the text in the text box with the information that's on our game instance right now. So we can drag in our main menu widget, and from here we can get our input player name text box, and we can simply set the text inside that text box. So set text editable text, and for the text we can use the player name that's inside the player profile structure that we just loaded. So get the player profile structure, break it, and plug in the name over here. So right now, if we open the main menu, it will always show the correct name that's inside our save game. So with those two functions in place, we can go back to the widget blueprint main menu, and in the event graph over there, we need to hook up this onTextCommitted event to our game instance, and make sure that we call our change player name event and plug in the new name. And we have that set up. So this should work, and right now if we hit play, we should get an empty text box because we didn't have any name in here yet. So I'm gonna simply enter my name in here. It doesn't really do anything at this moment, but we need to deal with that. So I can start the game, for example, walk around a little bit and close it down. And right now, if I would open this up, it will still have my player name in there because it's loading it from the Savegame object. So that's working as well. So now we have a little bit of the default stuff out of the way. In the next video, we're going to look at creating and looking for sessions. So thanks for watching, everybody. If you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like, and you're also welcome to join the GameDev Raw Discord to ask questions or simply talk about game dev stuff. So thanks for watching, everybody. Later.